Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, little devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Sri Prabhupada. Come to this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam class. It's from Canto 2, which is entitled The Cosmic Manifestation. Chapter 10, which is entitled Bhagavatam is the Answer to All Questions. And this morning we're doing text 23. So without further ado, we'll start the class. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivadadari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivadadari Yashoda Nandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Rajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivadadari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivadadari Yashoda Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari 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 Jayam Vishnupad Paramhansa Privajikacharya Stotra Satasya Maharaj Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramhansa Privajikacharya Stotra Satasya Maharaj His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavin Ki Jai. Namacharya Sri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivas Hari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shami Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mathura Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Swami Ki Jai. Ganga-mayi Ki Jai. Jamuna-mayi Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Hare Krishna Mahamantra Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktavinda Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the Lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Tirtha Swami Tinami. Namaste Krishna Varaya Prabhupada Siddhartha Shri Gaura Kalana Shakti Bhakti Sevitinam. Narayana Namasvecha Naronchevam Narotamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tatujayam Vajirayat Nashya Prayesva Bhadresu Nityam Bhagavati Sivaya Bhagavati Utamasloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishchiki Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Sri Prabhupada. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 10, Text 23. Vastuno mṛdu-kāṭhinya laghu-gurv-oṣṇa-śītatām jighṛkṣatas tvaṅ nirbhinnā tasyāṁ roma-mahī-ruhāḥ tatra cāntar bahir vātas tvacā labdha-guṇo vṛtaḥ. Hare Krishna. Vastuno mṛdu-kāṭhinya laghu-gurv-oṣṇa-śītatām jighṛkṣatas tvaṅ nirbhinnā tasyāṁ roma-mahī-ruhāḥ tatra cāntar bahir vātas tvacā labdha-guṇo vṛtaḥ. Vastuno mṛdu-kāṭhinya laghu-gurv-oṣṇa-śītatām jighṛkṣatas tvaṅ nirbhinnā tasyāṁ roma-mahī-ruhāḥ tatra cāntar bahir vātas tvacā labdha-guṇo vṛtaḥ. Hare Krishna. Please chant.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Vastuno mṛdu-kāṭhinya laghu-gurv-oṣṇa-śītatām jighṛkṣatas tvaṅ nirbhinnā tasyāṁ roma-mahī-ruhāḥ tatra cāntar bahir vātas tvacā labdha-guṇo vṛtaḥ. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Anyone else?
Vastuno mṛdu-kāṭhinya laghu-gurv-oṣṇa-śītatām jighṛkṣatas tvaṅ nirbhinnā tasyāṁ roma-mahī-ruhāḥ tatra cāntar bahir vātas tvacā labdha-guṇo vṛtaḥ. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Anyone else? All right, we'll do word for word. Vastuna, of all matter. Mṛdu, softness. Kāṭhinya, hardness. Laghu, lightness. Guru, heaviness. Oṣṇa, warmness. Śītatām, coldness. Jighṛkṣatas, desiring to perceive. Tvaṅ, the touch sensation. Nirbhinnā, distributed. Tasyāṁ, in the skin. Roma, hairs on the body. Mahī-ruhāḥ, as well as the trees, the controlling deities. Tatra, there. Cha, also. Anta, within. Bahir, outside. Tvacā, the sense of touch or the skin. Labdha, having been perceived. Guna, objects of sense perception. Vṛtaḥ, generated. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. When there was a desire to perceive the physical characteristics of matter, such as softness, hardness, warmth, cold, lightness, and heaviness, the background of sensation, the skin pores, the hairs on the body, and their controlling deities, the trees, were generated. Within and outside the skin is a covering of air through which sense perception becomes prominent. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The physical characteristics of matter, such as softness, are subjects of sense perception, and thus physical knowledge is the subject matter of the touch sensation. One can measure the temperature of matter by touching with the hand, and one can measure the weight of an object by lifting it with the hand and thus estimate its heaviness or lightness. The skin pores, and the hairs on the body are all interdependent with the touch sensation. The air blowing within and outside the skin is also an object of sense perception. This sense perception is also a source of knowledge, and therefore it is suggested here that physical or physiological knowledge is subordinate to the knowledge of the self, as above mentioned. Knowledge of self can expand to the knowledge of phenomena, but physical knowledge cannot lead to knowledge of the self. There is, however, an intimate relation between the hairs on the body and the vegetation on the body of the earth. The vegetables are nourishment for the skin, both as food and medicine, as stated in the third canto, tvacaṁ asya nirbhinnā vivishuddhishnam oshadi. Oma ginati viranyasya gyana ginashanakaya chakshu umilitam jena tasmai Shri Guruve namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Peshtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Tinamini. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Shatarini. Namo Mahabhadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namni Gurachise Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Shadi Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama Ram Ram Hare Hare. Translation again. When there was a desire to perceive the physical characteristics of matter, such as softness, hardness, warmth, cold, lightness, and heaviness, the background of sensation, the skin pores, the hairs on the body, and their controlling deities, the trees, were generated. Within and outside the skin is a covering of air through which sense perception becomes prominent. Hare Krishna. So, this is still the series in the area of Srimad Bhagavatam, where the senses were being generated and the controlling deities for the senses were being generated also. And that gives us the sense that this physical body with all its senses was generated in a certain way. Everything starts with the Lord. And actually, when it comes to annihilation, everything ends with the Lord also. The Chatu Shloka, which is in this canto 2, but in the previous chapter, chapter 9, text 33, 34, 35, and 36, those are the 4 shlokas or the 4 verses that put Bhagavatam in a nutshell. And one of them says that The Lord is, or Lord Vishnu is the one that is present before creation. Lord Vishnu is one who maintains the creation. And after the annihilation of the material world, that the Lord is still present. He's the only one that's there. So the Lord controls everything. That's why all the senses come through the Lord also. And this particular text is about the sensation of touch. Sensation of touch is very, very important in our lives. We'll, by the mercy of Guru and Gauranga, break down some parts of it and also see the connection of it to other senses. And then finally the air and how that is connected with the sense of touch. That all will be explained because it is here in the Bhagavatam, the last sentence. Within and outside the skin is a covering of air through which sense perception becomes prominent. But it is all through the Lord. It started with the Lord. And we already know he is the creator. But the Bhagavatam always says, yes, the religions talk about things in general, but Bhagavatam always explains in some detail. We say some detail because the Lord is unlimited. So even the Bhagavatam can explain some things, but only up to a certain point. Far more detail than you'll find anywhere else. True enough. But the Lord is unlimited. So nobody can describe Krishna fully. Not possible. So in this text, there was the desire to perceive characteristics of matter, properties of matter, how soft it is or hard, how warm, how cold, how light, or how heavy. So softness and hardness, how rigid something is or not rigid. Warmth or cold has to do with temperature. And lightness and heaviness has to do with weight. If you go to science, they'll tell you that you have to say mass instead of weight, but because weight has to do something with the gravitational pull also. But the common word used is weight, so we'll stay with weight. Lightness or heaviness has to do with weight. So when that was desired by the Lord, then the skin pores, and then the hairs in the body, those were generated. The controlling deities were the trees. There is a connection between the trees and the universal form. In other parts of the Shastra, the trees are likened to the hairs on the body. So the planet as a body and we as bodies, physical bodies, they are compared like that. We have hairs and the planet has trees. The hairs are on top of our bodies, surface, and the trees are also on the surface of the body of the planet. So the comparison is made like that. But now in this text, to go even more deeply into it, that the controlling deities also are connected with the trees. Sometimes some things are hard for us to kind of figure out or even process with our minds. But that's prominent quite a bit in the Shastra only because we are living in a place that's confined and our senses can only go but so far. So some things that Bhagavatam points out sometimes becomes big eye opener. Oh, is that really true? It doesn't gel with the way we think about things. But Srila Prabhupada has said the way we think about things, and he was just very direct. The way we think about things has no value. This is his word directly. No value. Because we just try to find out what this planet provides, what is present in this planet. The planet was already created. So Krishna and Lord Brahma, they know what's here already. We're trying to find out. So we have no business comparing it to they who are part of who are the actual creators. They know more. So, and therefore, when the Shastra describes some things, we're just going to have to take it as it is, even if it doesn't process so well in our minds. Because our minds is not the problem, not the Shastra, it's the minds that are limited. And our experiences are also limited. And our senses are also limited. Mm-hmm. So we have to take it as is. Now, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, physical characteristics of matter, those are subjects of sense perception. So physical knowledge is the subject matter of the touch sensation. Once you touch, then we can know something. You can measure the temperature of matter by touching with the hand. So sometimes you can say, oh, well, feeling is also part of it, but feeling has to do with touching. As we'll get into that in the great detail a little later, in more detail a little later. Srila Prabhupada says, yes, we know we can, how heavy an object is or how light it is, has to be, you just lift it, and then we estimate it's heavy, it's light, but that's also relative. Some things may be light to some people, but somebody else may think it's heavy. But for that person, for each person, lightness or heaviness can be perceived based on their own strength. So, Srila Prabhupada says, the skin and the skin pores and the hairs in the body are all interdependent. They all contribute to the touch sensation. Before this, science doesn't say anything about the hairs on the body contributing to the touch sensation. That's new from Bhagavatam. The skin and the skin pores, that is not surprising to science, but the hairs on the body, he says there is a layer of air. There's air all around, but there's a layer of air that is, for lack of a better word, trapped by the hairs on the body, and they contribute also to the touch sensation. So Srila Prabhupada says, the air blowing within and outside the skin, within and outside the skin. So now we've heard within the skin, also something new. That's why we said that what our knowledge is limited. And Srila Prabhupada says we shouldn't be bothered about the knowledge that's given to us by people who have instruments that have such error in it or such limitation. The precision is not so great. I'm still talking about the scientists. No matter what they put out, it's not as we can't get to so much detail because the senses are limited. We can't. So it is suggested that physical or physiological, let's define physiological. What's physiological? Physiological is something relating to the way the body, the living entity, or some bodily part of a living entity functions, the way it functions. That's called the physiology of it. And so the functioning here is how things relate to the sense of touch. Srila Prabhupada gives some connection to the soul here, even though he doesn't mention soul, he just said the self. This knowledge is subordinate to the knowledge of the self, as above mentioned, he said. The self is more important, the soul, than the physical attributes that's there that we use to function. The senses use to function. So towards the end, so we're just going through the purport now. He makes the relation between the hairs on the body and the vegetation on the body of Earth. We've already talked about the planet. The hairs are like the trees for the planet. And for us, our physical body, the hairs, we all know where the hairs are. So, tvaｃā asya vivinenam vivishul dishtam osadi. That's actually in Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 6th chapter, text 18. the rest of it is amshena roma-mahī-ruhāḥ ye asa padi padyate. The translation: when there was a separate manifestation of the skin, the controlling deities of sensations and their different parts entered into it, and thus the living entities feel itching and happiness due to touch. Itching and happiness due to touch. Now, so this part in the third canto talks about the sense perception of not only touching or lifting, for that matter. Lifting also involves touching, because you have to touch it before you have to hold it before you can lift it. So that's touching. So touching and itching, they are controlled by the skin and the hairs on the body. So the controlling deity of touch is the air passing within the body, and the controlling deity of hairs in the body is Oshadiya. That's the controlling deity. So for the skin and the object of perception, the object of perception for the skin is touch. And for the hairs on the body, the object of perception is itching. So it is through the hairs of the body that we itch. This is what is really being said here. Now, all right, so that's the theoretical way of perceiving reality when it comes to touching. So now we go into a little more detail about it. Touch, the sense of touch, it can be pleasurable and sometimes not pleasurable, especially when it comes to temperature. Something can be too cold, which is not pleasurable, or too hot, which is not pleasurable. But when it is room temperature, it can be pleasurable. Or a little bit above room temperature is tolerable and even pleasurable. So touch can also be pleasurable, especially in intimacy. We won't get into great detail about it, but I'm sure you know what I mean when I say touch is pleasurable in intimacy. When people hug or they get the bodies closer together, the bodies are touching, there is some pleasure from it. Now, since Srila Prabhupada is trying to get us to think more about going to the spiritual world, we will relate the sense of touch to the residents of the spiritual world briefly. The spiritual world residents do a whole lot more touching than those of us in the material world. We don't come close in touching and how often we touch compared to the spiritual world residents. They do a whole lot more touching. What's the reason? Well, my Guru Maharaj, Bhakti-tirtha Maharaj, put it this way. In the spiritual world, what binds everybody together is love. So he called love he defined love as the spiritual glue. We know glue is used to attach things. Everybody is attached to everybody else and relates to everybody else based on love. And I mean intense love. We don't even express that here so much. So the reason for that touch sensation being way more in the spiritual world to the residents there compared to us is there is far greater expression of love in the spiritual world than in the material world. They express it more. The spiritual world is full of residents in love, in intense love with each other, and also with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the expression of love is very, very prevalent among all the entities, including the cowherd boys and the cowherd girls. For the cowherd boys, we've seen in some of the expressions in Canto 10 of Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna, when he's with them, the cowherd boys, that is, he likes to rest on the body of different cowherd boys. When they've had their lunch together, and then they will take a break. Actually, the whole time they're having fun. The cows are, just being looked at. The cows can eat on their own. So they're having fun, the cowherd boys, with Krishna and Balaram. Krishna likes to rest in the body of different cowherd boys. And then they reciprocate by either massaging some part of the body, run their hands to their hair, the hair. This is all part of touch sensation. With the gopis, he likes to embrace them. Mm-hmm. And in the spiritual world, they embrace alone. If you know what the soul is like and what we're missing, the embrace itself gives more pleasure than anything intimate in the material world. Just the embrace. This was explained in a little more detail by Radhanath Swami in one of his lectures. And he put it this way: if a resident from the spiritual world came in their spiritual body to us, to any of us, and they literally just hugged us, the pleasure we'd feel would be so mind-blowing, we'd probably even faint. And there are situations that people even admire the beauty of someone in the spiritual world and fainted. There's whole pastimes about all of that. So the embrace itself gives more pleasure than anything intimate. And they love each other intensely. So they do a lot of holding hands, they do a lot of hugging. And the gopis will give any excuse to get close to Krishna, to serve Krishna. And that's why when they hear his flute in the middle of the night, they would leave home and go be with him. Now, sometimes some people have issues with that, but we tend to forget that we are in jail, and the rules and what we call right and wrong is based on jail rules for the jail. And Krishna is not in jail. So he doesn't go by that. And not only that, he's also the supreme controller. Everything belongs to him. Everything belongs to him. And then the gopis are willing to serve Krishna any way, at any time, at any place. That is their measure of love for Krishna. And so when they get up to go be with Krishna, it is actually the best thing when it comes to devotional service. But by the rules of the material world where we are on this planet, that's supposed to be the wrong thing for a young woman to get up in the middle of the night and go be with this lover, with her lover. That's not accepted here. And we don't practice that here. We're not supposed to practice it here because we are, at this point, temporarily residents in this material world, which is a house of correction. Krishna is not living life to be corrected about anything. That is the difference. In Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 4, text 18, 19, and 20, that talks about Maharaj Amrish and how he engaged, Maharaj Amrish, the pure devotee of the Lord, how he engaged all his senses in serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotees. So Maharaj Amrish, his mind was always used in meditating on the lotus feet of Krishna. And his words were used in describing the glories of the Lord. The hands were used in cleansing the Lord's temple, and his ears were used to hear words spoken by Krishna or about Krishna. His eyes were engaged in seeing the deity and going to Krishna's temples, his legs to Krishna's temples. Now, he engaged his sense of touch in touching the bodies of the Lord's devotees. This is what we were talking about, especially in the spiritual world. Now, here in the material world, we are restricted because of the three modes, especially the modes of passion when it comes to touching. And that's why restrictions are given the way they are. Because we're learning to be whole again in terms of the way we should live life, because we're living life based on being in jail, quite frankly. So Maharaj Amrish, he engaged his tongue in tasting the Lord Prasad. Now, does that connect to the sense of touch? Absolutely. The tongue is the one that tastes the Lord's Prasad. But to taste it, one must touch the Prasad first. One must take a piece of it and put it in the mouth. then the tongue will taste. So here's a connection of the sense of touch to the sense of tasting. To taste, one must touch first. Not only touch, but even feel the temperature of the prasad before it goes to the mouth. So to hold it and also to feel its temperature, sometimes we may want to eat something, it's very hot, and we touch it and immediately we leave it. We have to wait. Or maybe we'll blow on it first to get it to cool before we can take it. And that is, again, from the touch. The touch is the one that gave the information about the item being too hot. Maharaj Ambrish, his senses were used in serving the Lord 24 hours a day. So Maharaj Ambrish never desired anything for his own sense gratification. He engaged all his senses in devotional service to the Lord, various engagements related to the Lord. So we're saying that the sense that's new to us. What is important for us to do now is how to relate the sense of touch to devotional service to the Lord and his devotees and to Guru. That is something to think through, something to use our intelligence to figure out. Maharaj Ambrish was doing that. So, a few things we'll go over, things that we do normally. And as we hear, and I'm going to give some points, we should hear in terms of how, or we're hearing, but we should also think, how can I use that in devotional service? How can I use that in devotional service? That should be going on in our minds the whole time. So we said, to feel temperature, one has to touch. The hands give an indication of the temperature of something. When we wash ourselves, we touch water and we adjust the water to our liking. Even in the kitchen, we do that. We turn on the kitchen sink, and if we want to wash some dishes, we're going to adjust the temperature of the water before we start using it. We will never know what the temperature of the water is unless we touch it. So when we're washing, we touch the water and adjust it to our liking regarding the temperature. We also bathe with the water. Again, we do adjustment. These are all nothing new. You adjust the temperature of the water before you bathe with it. You adjust the temperature of water before you cook with it. When it's on the stove, it can be as hot as it wants to. We want to make it, but that's when we're not touching it. We know better than to touch it. We can wash things with the water. Now, to show our affection, we can touch our beloved. To show respect in some cultures, especially in Indian culture, we can touch the feet of someone. And of course, in Vaishnava lifestyle, we also touch the feet. We can touch the feet of the deity. Some people even touch the feet of the spiritual master. Not many spiritual masters like their feet being touched, but sometimes they allow that to happen. Bathing in the sacred rivers. That involves bathing in the river, and the river touches our bodies. So that's also another which involves the sense of touch. Now, the touch sensation is connected with other senses, which I gave some examples earlier. So to taste, that's the first one I gave. To taste, one has to touch it. You take the prasadam and then you've touched it because you're holding it and then you take it to the mouth. Now, a blind person, a person deprived of sight, they use touch extensively. Blind people literally very much depend on the sense of touch, more so than even those who are not blind, who can see. They can read with a sense of touch. Braille, it's called. They learn how to read by touching. the way the letters are positioned, and then they go on. Mm. They can estimate, these are blind people, they can estimate the size of something, again, by touching it. Mm. And seeing the contours of that particular object, then they can know the size. Now, even for us, those of us that are not blind, when we're in a dark room, what happens? We can't see anything. So the sense of touch is gone. We're like the blind person then, even though our eyes may be open. So what do? We extend our hands in front of us, naturally extend our hand in front of us to touch so that we can estimate if we're heading towards anything that would obstruct us. So again, the sense of touch becomes very important. To feel the weight of something, one must touch it. Now, in spiritual life, we also do some things that involve very much touching. To chant japa, one must touch the japa beads. For kirtan, we need kartals, we need harmonium, we need mridanga. Every one of these instruments are used by touching them. We hold the kartals, we play the notes on the harmonium, and we beat the two different sides, big and small, of mridanga. This is all touching. If we're cooking, one has to touch boga. Several utensils and kitchen flatware, all of that have to be touched. When we're offering the boga, one has to ring a bell by holding it, which means you have to touch it. To offer artik, one must hold and touch all the artik paraphernalia. The incense has to be held, the ghee has to be held with the ghee holder, the matches has to be held to light the ghee, or water in the conch has to be poured, handkerchief has to be held, flower has to be held, chamra has to be held, peacock fan has to be held. All of that is touching. And to read, one must hold the book. And to read on the computer, one has to use the mouse or the touch screen. Again, this is all touching. So it's very, very intimate in our lives, this whole point of touching. So the conclusion is that touching, the sense of touching, is extensively used in our lives. The point is how to use the sense of touching more in devotional service than in sense gratification. And that is for every individual based on how, or the extent to which they have grown in Krishna consciousness. That's why we gave so many examples and related all of those to the sense of touching. So that's up to us. The touch sensation is all around in our lives. We should think more, use our intelligence, or pray to the Lord. Pray to Lord Gauranga, pray to our spiritual master, pray to Srila Prabhupada. To spiritualize our touch, meaning that we think more of how to use the sense of touch in devotional service to the Lord. Then we will be doing ourselves a great favor of getting closer and closer to the point where we receive the mercy of the Lord to go back to the spiritual world. And speaking about the spiritual world, there is a situation that was said a long time ago in the 90s by my spiritual master. And he was pretty much predicting the future. This is Bhakti Maharaj. Now I see it very, very, very plainly. So that's what we're going to, focus a little bit more on. What's happening now is that there are forces that are trying to control our minds, make us think a certain way. And everything is packaged in such a way that the mind gets controlled. Now, while that is not going to stop, that is true, because this is the way in which people are planning things, whether they have good intentions or not so good intentions, that is being planned that way. And many people are deceived. And when people get deceived, they get confused, and then they think something is right, when in fact it's upside down thinking. But the devotees have to, for us, the devotees, we have to be pinpointed, and that is in Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Canto 2. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2 has it, but Bhagavad Gita Canto 2 also talks about it. Now, 2 actually in 41. Chapter 2, verse 41 in Bhagavad Gita. It talks about being pinpointed. Our goal is to get out of the material world and take as many people with us back to the spiritual world. That should be our goal. Not just, I am a devotee, therefore I do bhakti yoga, therefore I chant and I do this, and it's something that we do. If you think only like that, then you are at the term, or you're living the term, which is called niyamagraha. It is in the nectar of instruction. You're doing things just to do it. That is not a mature way of looking at it. You have to do things with a certain aim in mind. And the aim is to leave the material world and go back to the spiritual world, where the sense of touch, even there, is all spiritualized. And it is used in the service of the Lord. Now, so yes, we have to chant the holy name of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. The idea of chanting is to program our minds in service to devotees, to the Guru, and to Radha Krishna. This is what Lord Gauranga and Lord Nityananda came to teach us to do, to chant the holy name of the Lord. Now, that also develops love, helps us develop love for Krishna, something that we've fallen out of because we were envious of Krishna, and therefore the love couldn't possibly be there for Krishna when you're envious of someone. When you're envious of someone, you don't love them. We wound up in the material world. So while we're here, and there is an attempt now to take over our minds, we should be very, 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 very focused on turning the mind towards going back to Godhead and taking as many people with us to go back to Godhead by preaching, by giving prasadam, by giving books so they can read, books by Srila Prabhupada to send us back to the spiritual world. Now, why to go there? Why are we going to the spiritual world? First of all, we're leaving jail. We're leaving the material world. That's one reason, big reason. And the second reason is not talked about as much. It's talked about to some extent. What it is like in the spiritual world. Srimad Bhagavatam tells us, Bhagavad Gita tells us a little bit, Srimad Bhagavatam tells us a little more, but Brihad Bhagavatamrita tells us a whole lot more. That is the experience by a devotee of a Lord cowherd boy called Gopakumara. His name on the earth is Gopakumara. His spiritual name is Sarupa. So he had a mantra given to him by a spiritual master. And with that mantra, he could travel anywhere. He could be taken anywhere that he wanted to be. So he was here on this earth first. Even in Jagannath Puri, he spent some time there with Lord Jagannath. Then he started going up higher through the mantra. And if you're wondering what the mantra is, want to know more about it, because the mantra was never stated in Brihad Bhagavatamrita for obvious reasons. The idea is not to tell people what the mantra is. We also can go wherever they want to go as they like. This was a special privilege given to Gopakumara. So he knew the mantra. He also got the blessings of Srimati Radharani when he was in Vrindavan before leaving to go up the higher planets. Swagaloka, that's the first set of heavenly planets. Swagaloka, that's where also Lord Indra lives. Now, some parts of it are very hilarious. Some things that happened to Lord Indra when Gopakumara was there, literally. Indra is the king of heaven, but there were some incidents that caused Indra to lose his position temporarily. So Gopakumara was made the king of heaven. And he's a devotee, so he didn't bring any kind of material contamination to that particular position when he had that briefly. He always, because you're king of heaven, so you can appoint other people to different positions. And everybody that he appointed was a devotee. He made sure that happened. Then further up is Mahaloka. The planetary system Mahaloka is above Swargaloka. He was there. He saw some people who were getting ready to come to the earth for a particular reason. They were higher beings in terms of their understanding of spirituality and the way they lived it. And they told Gopakumara that they were coming to the earth, particularly in India, the sacred rivers, to purify the sacred rivers. Why? Well, those who are contaminated, sinful people, they also bathe in the water to purify themselves. But then they leave the impurity, not physical impurity, but impurity based on the kind of persons they are and mode of passion and ignorance. That is taken up, absorbed by the river. So then the river also becomes contaminated. And those people that he met, Mahaloka, they were going to mostly the India, where the rivers are, to purify those. Janaloka, a lot of sacrifices, pujas being performed. Same in Tapaloka. So as I mentioned, we're going higher and higher. And the topmost was Brahmaloka. And Brahmaloka is where Lord Brahma lives. It's also called Satyaloka. The one personality, actually two personalities that visit Brahmaloka are Garbhodakshaya Vishnu and Karanodakshaya Vishnu, Mahavishnu. Karanodakshaya Vishnu or Mahavishnu is the one through whose pores all of the universes come to be. That one Vishnu. Then he expands to Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, and there's one Garbhodakshaya Vishnu for each universe. Through Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, Lord Brahma is born. So at Brahmaloka, Brahma's father is Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. And so the father comes to visit. Now what goes on there? A lot of pujas, a lot of sacrifices, constantly going on. And for the sacrifices, there is prasad from the sacrifices. And Mahavishnu and Garbhodakshaya Vishnu are given shares. Their shares from the prasad for the sacrifices. So they come together. They have their own planets too in the spiritual world, both Vishnus. But they spend time here, or not here, but in Brahmaloka with Lord Brahma. So that goes on. Gopakumara describes some of it. And then past the Viraja River to the Viraja River is one that separates material world from the spiritual world. And from Viraja River, so now Gopakumara chants his mantra. He's gone off from material world, finished Brahmaloka. Now he's gone past the coverings of the universe to the Viraja River. Crossing the Viraja River, we come to the outskirts of the spiritual world. That's where Lord Shiva is. So he also met Lord Shiva and Lord Shiva's followers. He was very impressed with them. But Lord Shiva told him, I know your nature, Gopakumara. This is not the place to stay. So keep going. So Lord Gopakumara chants his mantras. And now he's in the spiritual world proper, away from the outskirts. And now he's in the spiritual world. And that's when it becomes quite interesting. We know about Golok Vrindavan. He does get there later because that's the farthermost planet. But the first Vaikuntha planets, he was actually taken to those by residents who met him in Brahmaloka, residents in the spiritual world. They actually took him in a nice, wonderful spiritual aircraft to the Vaikuntha planet. And the first Vaikuntha planet that he was taken to all the Vaikuntha planets have gates. They have gates, and multiple gates, not just one gate. So the residents there took him to one Vaikuntha planet, through the gates to the very last one. And Vaikuntha planet is ruled by Lord Narayan. And they had to tell Lord Narayan, they means residents there that were with Gopakumara. They had to tell Lord Narayan that Gopakumara had come. So then they had Gopakumara wait at the gate, the last gate from which, after which you pass through and then you're in the planet proper. They went and told them. But while they were going to tell him, Gopakumara was waiting, there were some other residents who had gone out. There's a lot of traveling that goes on. And they were returning to that particular planet. Gopakumara's experience of one resident in the spiritual world, when he saw how well dressed and how many, the decoration, the jewelry, and so on, that has to be an extremely rich person to have that kind of jewels on him. And Gopakumara made the mistake of thinking that was Lord Narayan. So he bowed, gave his respects to this particular person, thinking that was Lord Narayan that had come. Why Gopakumara thought that way, I can't explain that to you, because, of course, the residents had gone to speak to Lord Narayan. So you say, well, why would Gopakumara think of that particular personality as Lord Narayan when those that were with him had gone to speak to Lord Narayan? That would be a good question. But anyway, he thought that way. And he offered great respects. And when he finally stopped and got back up, the resident from the spiritual world was smiling at him and saying, I know you think that I'm the Supreme Lord Narayan. I'm not. I'm just a resident here. But the way he was dressed, there was so much indication of wealth on him, just even from how he's dressed. It is said in the Bhagavad-gītā, give one more point, and then we'll wrap up, that the residents in the spiritual world have access to so much wealth like what you would get in a material universe. One person has access to that. One entity has access to that much wealth. The spiritual planets themselves are huge. It's also described in terms of their sizes compared to the universes here. Between 1 trillion and 2 trillion times, one spiritual planet is that much bigger compared to a material, not planet, material universe. Which means a spiritual planet is 1 trillion to 2 trillion times bigger than one of the material universes. So obviously, the things that are in there have to be way plentiful. So it shouldn't be surprising that one resident will have the kind of wealth that you can find in the universe, in the material world. Why are we saying all of this? The whole idea is to get us to disconnect from what is here. Everybody, by spiritual standards, well, what is in the spiritual world is dirt poor. We don't have anything near the kind of wealth that's there. And then you add the fact that there's no sickness there, there is no old age, people don't die, everything is provided, immense wealth is there. So we have to understand it's best to do the simple thing like chanting the holy name of the Lord, not being offensive to each other, and living this very simple lifestyle here. A few instructions that we have to obey to disconnect from this place. But we gave that comparison because many of us try to get wealth, to live decently. And then we look at other people and say, well, I've got better situation. I'm in a better situation than them. Therefore, I'm satisfied. And that's the problem. When we're satisfied with what's here, we're going to stay here. And that's why we took the trouble to tell you One person that goes to the spiritual world has access to wealth that would be in the universe. Never mind this one planet like the Earth. People trying to be the richest here. So we shouldn't waste our time. Home is where it's all at in the spiritual world. Mm-hmm. So while we're using our touch sensation, the sense of touch, spiritualizing it as much as possible, we have to understand that we have left so much in the spiritual world and come to put ourselves in such trouble, so much anxiety. It's not worth it. Srila Prabhupada is guiding us by just chanting the Hare Krishna mantra and hearing and having prasad and not offending and obeying a few regulated principles, which we shouldn't live anyway, because that's all based on the body. And if you live like that, you're going to get another body next life and get stuck in this place. While the spiritual one has so much, unbelievably more to give to us. And that's the message we want to send this morning. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, this is the time to deal with this. If you want to ask questions, you can. If you want to talk about some takeaways, you can. Realizations you want to share, you can. But the one point is, as we've gone through a few things about the sense of touch, but remember, if we think that we're going to try to make it and be happy in this world, we are in so much illusion, it's not funny. That's why we spend time to tell you what Gopakumara described in Brihad-bhagavatamrita. Don't think about wealth in the material world. It's nothing compared to what's in the spiritual world. And there's absolutely no anxiety. Everything is provided. And you don't work. Whatever you do to serve the Lord is based on a volunteer basis because you want to serve the Lord. You're not required. You serve out of love. There's no requirement. Much better lifestyle, needless to say. Hare Krishna. Any questions or comments? Yes, Damadapu, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna,
All
obeisances, all glories to Prabhupada, all glories to the devotees on the call.
Jai.
Thank you for such a nice class. One thing, just towards the end, when you were mentioning that it is like, beyond our imagination, how it is in the spiritual world. I was just like, I just remembered that I was hearing during a discussion with some devotee, and then he was saying like that like in the spiritual world there are fragrances even beyond the fragrances in the material world, like we don't even have them in the material world. And similarly, like for other senses, like the colors they have, the colors are also like a lot of variety, more variety than whatever exists on the earth. So
way
like,
more.
yeah, because basically it just makes sense that we will have spiritual senses, and which, like, if we have spiritual senses, which means it is like it has unlimited power to, like, it's not like a microscope which is just able to see the seven colors, distinguish between the seven colors. If it is a spiritual sense, that means it has like a lot of potency, like, so that just makes sense. That, like, how wonderful it will be. So that was just like a reminder.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comment. The whole point here was trying to get us to disconnect from this jail that we think that we're having fun in just because we're working hard and getting some money and able to pay our bills. We shouldn't be in that kind of illusion. It's okay temporarily, but we're just living here. And there's so much that goes against us. We get sick, other living entities give us trouble. The weather changes in winter, we get hit left and right. We just had a whole bunch of snow and then below zero temperatures at night. Why? The temperature in Sipapa described in the spiritual world is in low to mid 70s with a light breeze the whole time. Think about that. The whole time. This is the time of leaving these physical bodies, that type of temperature. Everybody says it's very, 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 very pleasant. That's what people describe in the material world. But they have that constantly in the spiritual world. And look at us. So there's no point being here. No point. Once we understand, the religionists don't even know it like that. Because they've been taught to go to the heavenly planet. That's like going on an extended vacation, but vacations do end, and you're going to come back to this lower medium planet again. And if you act in the mode of ignorance, you go even further down or into a body that is not human. So it's not worth it being here. That risk is there all the time. Thank you for your comments, Hare Krishna. Any other questions or comments? The main thing I want to describe, don't get taken by a little bit of breadcrumbs that you call wealth that you have here. It's breadcrumbs. It's nothing compared to what's in the spiritual world. Prepare to go home. Take that more seriously. Hare Krishna. Any comments? Okay, it's on the top of the hour. It's actually past the top of the hour. So we'll stop here. Thank you all for coming. Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhivya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Again, thank you. Hare Krishna.